When Senator J.D. Vance called Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett ghetto on national television, he was expecting outrage. But instead, she stayed composed. She looked straight into the camera, and what she said next became unforgettable. The tension in the studio was thick, like the quiet before a storm. 4 guests circled a gleaming glass table, the studio lights casting reflections of nerves and skin alike. The panel was supposed to be about rebuilding the economy in under-resourced areas, but, as with many live debates, things veered off track. Vance, known for interrupting and grandstanding, took up space with smug confidence, acting like the only grown-up in the room. "Let's be real," he said, waving a hand as if dismissing a child's drawing. "Throwing cash at failing schools and calling it progress isn't reform." Crockett had been silent, not due to lack of insight, but because she knew how these setups went. Let the arrogance talk itself into a corner, then bring the receipts. She leaned in. "If by failing schools you mean institutions that have been systematically underfunded, understaffed, and overlooked by state governments," she said, calm but firm, "then yes, let's pour money into them. Because communities that have been looted deserve restoration." There was a slight pause, enough for the host to shift awkwardly. But she pressed on. "You say handouts, but what you mean is, if it doesn't mirror your world, it's disposable." Then came the moment that broke the internet. Vance interrupted. His tone tightened, eyes narrowed. "You're just being ghetto," he said. It was quiet, almost tossed off, like seasoning added to a stew. But it landed like a brick through glass. The studio went still. The other panelists froze. The host blinked. Viewers across the country paused mid-bite. It wasn't just the term. It was the way he said it, like her identity could be condensed into a slur disguised as commentary. But Jasmine didn't blink. She inhaled, adjusted her mic, and met the camera head-on. "I'm not shocked," she said, voice even but sharp. "Because when black women speak with certainty, when we challenge power, we're not seen as assertive. We're labeled." Vance shifted in his seat. He realized he'd crossed a line. "You hear ghetto?" she continued. "But I hear South Dallas. I hear strength. I hear my mother raising 3 children on food stamps, working double shifts, and still showing up for PTA meetings, wearing dignity like armor." That moment became viral before the broadcast even wrapped. It was clipped, subtitled, shared, and stitched across every platform. Some called her a hero. Others said she should have walked out. Many black women simply said, "Thank you." The discussion awkwardly moved back to policy, but no one was listening. The internet had already claimed the moment. Jasmine remained composed, but her fingers tapped the table with a rhythm that said more than words. She knew better than to play into the angry black woman stereotype. But her point had landed. It wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about the labels that cling even when you've earned your seat at the table. Jasmine Crockett peeled that label off, live and with precision. But what most didn't see was everything that came before. Before she was Congresswoman Crockett, she was Jazz. No cameras, no tailored suits. Just a South Dallas girl with rough hands from helping her uncle fix brakes in the heat. South Dallas teaches loud. It doesn't nudge, it hollers. You speak up or you get drowned out by sirens, shouts, and life. At home, her mother ruled with a glance. Marlene worked 6 days a week cleaning homes in Highland Park. She came home sore, fingers raw from bleach, and still cooked before collapsing on the couch, church socks still on. Outside, Jazz walked the line between too sharp and too real. Teachers called her attitude what was actually survival. She was 10 when a substitute called her ghetto fabulous for challenging a worksheet that said Martin Luther King's mission was complete. She didn't know what it meant, but it didn't sound kind, she told her mom. Marlene didn't protest at the school. She just said, "Next time, finish your thought and say it louder." Jazz joined debate not for argument's sake, but to make herself heard without apology. By the time she reached Prairie View A&M, people knew her name, not because she dressed to impress, but because she made people pause. She carried South Dallas with her into classrooms, into courtrooms, and eventually into Congress. It showed up in how she wore her hair, how she asked questions, how she remembered the names others forgot. They told her to soften her presence, to play down where she came from. But she didn't. She tuned in harder, listened more, spoke deliberately. Her stories weren't just hers. They belonged to the women and kids still fighting to be seen. So when J.D. Vance threw that word at her, he didn't just target her. He hit everyone she stood for. Still, her past didn't quite prepare her for the spotlight. After law school, she worked in a cramped public defender's office where justice was lopsided. She fought for kids caught in a system that judged them before they even spoke. One night, driving home from court in full courtroom attire, she got pulled over. The officer questioned her presence in her own car. That's when she stopped trying to blend into a system built without her in mind. She opened her own law practice in Texas, fought evictions, cleared records, helped women flee abusive homes. She showed up with time, heart, and memory, not in designer suits, but with presence. People noticed. When a city council seat opened, her name rose. After George Floyd's death, it rose louder. She didn't just protest. She got protesters out of jail. Then came her run for office. And she won. Still, Congress wasn't built for her. The stares, the security checks, the whispers, none of it stopped her. She kept showing up, South Dallas, in her steps and steel in her spine. That TV moment was another test. After the cameras stopped, no one said anything. The producers looked away. The host avoided eye contact. Jasmine unclipped her mic and left with her head up, but her stomach turned. She'd been insulted before, but never like this. In her hotel, she watched the clip again, already viral. Her name was trending. Some praised her, others mocked her. One tweet read, "This is why they don't belong on panels." That one cut deepest. She didn't sleep, not from anger, but from responsibility. Girls were watching. Teachers would show that clip in class. Mothers would use it as a lesson. By morning, her inbox was overflowing with support, with stories. She sat by the window, yellow notepad in hand, scribbling thoughts. Why is it ghetto when I speak plainly, but authentic when he yells? Why must I dress like a pastor's wife to be heard? Why do we act like everyone's playing fair? She knew one thing. She would respond. But not with a thread, not a soundbite, not a polished press release. She would speak her way, with the voice, shaped by sidewalks, salons, and supper tables. Not just to clap back, but to draw a line and make sure it stayed visible. Because being heard as a black woman in America still comes with a cost. But Jasmine Crockett, she's not paying it quietly. Let the outrage die down, they said. Let the news cycle spin itself out like it always does. Some advisors whispered that staying quiet might be the smartest choice. One even suggested, why give it more oxygen? But Jasmine knew better. Courtrooms and community halls had taught her long ago, silence doesn't shield you. It just gives someone else the pen to write your story. And this time, she refused to hand it over. By the second day, the narrative had already been twisted in a dozen directions. A conservative outlet splashed a headline reading, "Crockett overreacts, plays the race card on live TV." A primetime host smirked while using air quotes around aggressive. Social media buzzed with clipped edits, scrubbing out the insult and portraying her response as unprovoked. But they underestimated. One thing, people were watching the full footage. Not just the snips, not just the spin. And when they did, they saw a woman remain steady while being provoked. Composed, controlled, but unmistakably fierce. By day 3, something unexpected began happening. People who typically stayed out of politics began speaking up. A retired judge in Iowa posted, If you think Jasmine Crockett crossed a line, you've never seen how black women are treated in courtrooms. A high school principal in California played the clip in a civics class. Half the girls quoted Jasmine's remark about her mother carrying food stamps in her purse but dignity in her stride. An activist from New Mexico stitched the video on TikTok and said, "I don't know her, but this was for us." Then came the flood. A Grammy-winning artist tweeted, "Don't let them shame you for your roots." An actor posted, "That's what representation looks like," and beyond the headlines, the most powerful response came from everyday people, women who'd lived through the same kind of coded slights, who had been called too loud, too angry, too unprofessional. One woman wrote, "I work in HR. I code switch all day just to fit in. Watching you stand firm made me cry in the break room." Another message came from a grandmother in Mississippi. She never finished school, but she raised 3 daughters who became teachers. "You reminded me of them," she wrote. "You reminded me that holding your head high is a kind of resistance." Still, the backlash didn't go away. Conservative voices accused her of using identity for sympathy. Others scoffed at her pride in where she came from, as if that was something to be ashamed of. Then the more subtle fallout crept in. A leak from the Hill said colleagues were murmuring about her temperament. Another rumor suggested she was now too polarizing for leadership positions. She wasn't surprised. In law and politics, black women were expected to endure and absorb, not to respond. Speak up and you're angry. Stay quiet and you're passive. Jasmine wasn't playing either role. She was simply being herself, in public. She granted an interview, not to a major network, but to a small station back in Fort Worth, where she'd visited family as a child. She picked that spot for a reason. This wasn't just national news, it was personal. When asked about the backlash, she didn't flinch. "I've been told my whole life that I'm too much," she said. "Too direct, too passionate, too loud, too black, too ghetto. I'm done apologizing." She leaned forward, not to dramatize, but to clarify. If that makes people uncomfortable, maybe they should ask themselves why. 3 days after the incident, Jasmine went live, not with a press crew or studio lights, just her, a basic webcam, a chipped mug, and a truth that needed saying. She didn't script it. She spoke like she was at the kitchen table with people who understood. "I wasn't going to respond like this," she began, "but I read your messages, I felt your stories, and this isn't just my moment anymore." She never mentioned J.D. Vance by name. She didn't need to. "I've heard words like ghetto, angry, unprofessional all my life," she said. "And for a long time I thought if I dressed right, spoke softly, earned degrees, won elections, that maybe one day those words would stop. But they never do. They just show up in nicer suits." She paused, letting the silence land with meaning. "I wasn't offended because I've never been ghetto. I was offended because I have been. And I know what that word really means." When said a certain way, she explained, it's not just a word, it's a warning, a fence, a limit. The video spread fast, past classrooms, church groups, and break rooms. What struck people wasn't just what she said, but how she said it. Not as a defense, as an invitation. "I'm not asking for sympathy," she said. "I'm asking for honesty. Until we're honest about who gets labeled and why, we're just polishing the same old disrespect with new words." The clip hit 1 million views in under 2 hours. A Cleveland pastor built a sermon around her words. A hairstylist in Detroit told local news, "She said what we've been carrying for years." A youth coach in Florida played the clip for his team and said, "This is how you carry yourself when they try to shrink you." Even some journalists who'd ignored her started quoting her. But Jasmine didn't measure the impact through likes or retweets. She knew it landed when she got a text from Clarice in Amarillo, a mother, no blue check, just a photo of her daughter holding up a printout of Jasmine's quote. "She's using it for her school speech," the message read. "Thank you for saying it out loud and right." She felt it then. Not pride, not satisfaction, responsibility. Because when you speak with grace and conviction, it stops being about a soundbite. It becomes about who hears you and who finds strength because you didn't shrink. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance didn't apologize. He doubled down in a radio interview. "Some people are just too sensitive," he said. But this wasn't about thin skin. It had become something bigger. Sponsors pulled out of his book tour. A university canceled a speaking gig. A tech conference dropped him from their keynote lineup. Even 2 Republican colleagues released quiet statements about the need for civility and avoiding racially charged language. The cracks were showing. Back home, students wrote op-eds. A senior in Toledo penned a piece titled, "Why My Congressman Owes Jasmine Crockett an Apology." She wrote, "I've grown up hearing that I'm too ghetto. No one ever explains what that means. Jasmine showed me I don't have to shrink to be respected." Vance went silent. Appearances dropped. Press requests ignored. But the damage wasn't about reputation. It was about revelation. People saw the power dynamic. They saw what happens when a black woman dares to take up space. And Jasmine? She didn't crow. She didn't spike the ball. She kept working. 2 weeks later, she stood in a school gym in Tulsa. No press. Just rows of girls in folding chairs, some texting, some skeptical. "I'm not here to lecture you," she began. "I've been where you are, in a room where no one thinks you're listening." She told them about South Dallas, about being the only one in court who looked like her, about being talked over and brushed aside. She told them about the insult. And one girl raised her hand. "How'd you not curse him out?" The room chuckled, but Jasmine answered seriously. "Because I wasn't talking to him," she said. "I was talking to you." She told them respect isn't earned by dimming who you are. It's claimed by showing up as yourself. Later, a girl named Kiara approached her quietly. "I write poems," she said, "but someone told me they sounded too ghetto." Jasmine read one. It was raw and powerful. "If that's what ghetto sounds like," she told her, "then the world better listen up." On the flight back to D.C., Jasmine thought again about that word. It had been used to cage her, but it also opened a conversation that needed to be had. A year later, the network called. Same panel, same table, same co-panelist. Her team hesitated. "You already made your point." But Jasmine wasn't done. "This isn't about him," she said. "It's about the girls still watching." She wore a burnt orange suit. No apologies, no performance. When Vance tried again with a veiled dismissal, "Let's not get emotional," she answered, cool and clear. "You call it emotional because you've never had to choose between rent and groceries. You call it emotional, I call it experience." And just like that, she claimed the room. No yelling, no stunts, just clarity. And when asked afterward if she had anything to add, she simply said, "The record speaks for itself." Because real power isn't about shouting, it's about refusing to shrink. And now, the next time someone hears a woman like Jasmine Crockett speak, unapologetic, unfiltered, and firm, and thinks she's too much, they might finally realize that's not too much, that's what leadership sounds like.